What is the cost of living in Playa del Carmen, Mexico? Hey, welcome to this video where the goal will be to answer that question for you based on my experience living in Playa del Carmen, Mexico for a combined 17 months. Now, I'm going to share with you where I've stayed, what type of places I've rented, what I've paid for the monthly rent, and I'll also share with you the transportation, the cost of the transportation, and then the cost of food. So you get a better understanding of the cost of living in Playa del Carmen, Mexico. I do want to share with you very quickly before I share with you all the details is that it really depends on the area where you go. You can find areas that are maybe even cheaper than what I'm going to share with you, and you can definitely find areas that are more expensive also than what I'm going to share with you. So with that being said, I want to let you know that when I first stayed in Playa del Carmen, I rented 2 different high-rise apartment buildings, and I also rented one apartment building that was maybe not as upscale. Now, the 2 high-rise apartment buildings that I rented was for 1 month, and then one I rented for a month and a half. Both of them had rooftop pools, amazing views of Playa del Carmen, and they were in line with, if you are familiar with Playa del Carmen at all, you will know that there's the side of the bridge where there's the ocean, and then there's the side of the bridge where there is not the ocean. Now, these specific high-rise apartments were in line with a Home Depot or Office Depot, something like this, close to 30th Street. Now the Home or Office Depot is right next to the bridge. If you take that street and you go towards the beach, you would walk right past those apartment buildings. One of them is called Iris Studios. The other one is you keep walking past Iris Studios for about literally just to the corner of the street, and it's right on your left, an apartment building that has red. If you see, for example, if you're in Iris Studios, you'd be on the rooftop, you would see the rooftop of that other building. It has a rooftop with a pool as well. So I spent a combined 2.5 months in those 2 buildings, and the cost of living in those 2 buildings was very similar for both. I spent anywhere between 700 to 900 Canadian per month for each of these buildings. Now that's maybe a little bit more expensive than what you might want. It could be right in your wheelhouse, give or take. You can find places, as I said, for less, which I'll share with you some of the other places I've been to, because all the other places I've been to in Playa del Carmen were actually less for my monthly rent. So those were the most expensive apartments I've been to, and again, they averaged anywhere between 700 to 900 Canadian, because one was a little bit more, one was a little bit less. Anyways, that gives you a better idea, and these apartments were, in my case, both were studio apartments, and they had amazing views from the rooftop, obviously an amazing pool, etc. And the Wi-Fi, for the most part, worked well in one of the studios. In Iris Studios, it did not work so well because we had multiple people sharing the Wi-Fi. So if I, would say anything regarding if you're coming to Playa del Carmen to do your work and you want to work from your apartment, then be mindful that at Iris Studios, at least at the time I was there, it was not that great. The other apartment that is literally on the same street, just on the left side, that apartment, the internet there was much, much better. Anyways, with that being said, that was the rent that I paid for those 2.5, it was almost 3 months, but it was about 2.5 months, I'll say, give or take, maybe 2 months and 21 days, something like this. That was my stay there. Now, the other month that I stayed that one time, I stayed at an apartment called Elephant Studios. Now, I've stayed at Elephant Studios in Playa del Carmen multiple times, actually, for a combined 3 months. The first time I was in Playa del Carmen, it was only 1 month that I stayed there, and I believe I paid about $400 Canadian every single month that I stayed at Elephant Studios. Now, my first time I stayed, I had a little bit of a bigger room, and the second time I stayed, I had a little bit of a smaller room, but both times I paid anywhere between 400 to 450 Canadian max per month, and that was 3 months combined. The first time I stayed 1 month, the second time I stayed 2 months. Elephant Studios is not as upscale, but you still have a rooftop. There's no pool. There's a little bit of a couple weights up on the rooftop, at least when I used to live there. The Wi-Fi in the building works very well. You have Wi-Fi on the rooftop. On every level you have Wi-Fi. I think it's got like 2 or 3 levels. Three levels. It's got floor, second level, third level, and the rooftop. And the Wi-Fi, you have Wi-Fi on every level, works incredibly well, and you can expect to maybe pay anywhere between 400 to 500 Canadian per month to rent an apartment at Elephant Studios. If you do happen to want to check out a location, you just type Elephant Studios into your map, and like Google Maps or something, and it's going to come up. Keep in mind, Elephant Studios, I believe it's not spelled like you spell elephant. I think it's ELFANT, something like this. It's spelled a little bit different. Anyways, the building has an elephant on it, and it's very close to CTM. So CTM is a main street that runs through Playa del Carmen, kind of going from the beach through into the jungle area, or like past Plaza Las Americas. In that area is like a mall, and then jungle area, and there's more complex buildings more residential areas in there, etc. But this was, Elephant Studios was on the side of the bridge where there is the ocean. Very close to the bridge, okay? But still on the side of the bridge where there is the ocean. And then, like I said, the cost of living there was about 400 to 450 Canadian every single month. Again, keep in mind that place is not as upscale as the other two studios, but the price is almost half. You know, the other studios, like I said, was 700 to 900 between that range. This one was, 400 to 450. So, quite a bit less in price, and the quality of the studio is still very nice. The neighborhood surrounding it is not, the nicest, give or take. You want to be mindful of that, but, none of the neighbors ever were a problem for me. Sometimes at night you have, dogs barking, which you can kind of be expecting that in Playa del Carmen or in Mexico, where I've been in general. I've had dogs barking for the most part throughout the night. So you might want some earplugs, etc. And the neighborhood where Elephant Studios is, I definitely think it's not as upscale. The neighborhood where it was Iris Studios and the other apartment complex is a little bit more of an upscale neighborhood, I would say. But give or take, you're obviously going to pay a little bit more there. Now, with that being said, that was a combined, this took up almost 6 months of my combined stay in Playa del Carmen between these studios. The other time I came to Playa del Carmen, I was staying in a studio apartment called Green Hills, or Green Hills is the location. Now, this was on Constituentes. If you take Constituentes, which is kind of almost in the center of Playa del Carmen, and this too goes from the beach area all the way through into the jungle area. So it was on Constituentes, on the opposite side of the bridge where there is the jungle, not the ocean. Now, it wasn't too far on the other side of the bridge, and this was a studio apartment. It had a little bit of green plants in it or whatever, and I paid about 400 to 430 on average per month for this studio apartment. Now, I would say this was probably the least upscale place I've stayed in my whole entire time in Playa del Carmen, but the affordability wise, it was very affordable. I do also want to say that at the Green Hills apartment, it was where I met quite a few other people. It honestly felt like a very social place. So if you want to find a place that I would say feels or felt very social when I was there, that would be it. The internet at the place worked quite well for the most part. And obviously I would say that, it was not as upscale, but if you're on a budget, then that's something you might want to consider if you want your own space, for being able to pay anywhere between 400 to 450 a month. If I gave you recommendations between Green Hills or Elephant Studios, I would recommend take Elephant Studios over Green Hills, because you pretty much would pay the same amount, and Elephant Studios is a little bit more upscale. And with Elephant Studios, you have a little bit of a better rooftop with a better view than you do at a place like Green Hills. Green Hills is a little bit more rundown in comparison to Elephant Studios. That's just my advice. If you are considering any of the two, I would go Elephant Studios over Green Hills if you can. And again, the price is about the same. Now, this was 4 months I stayed at Green Hills. Then I also stayed 3 months at another apartment that was very close to CTM as well. I think it was on 38th Street, and was also very close to the bridge. Now, I shared this apartment with someone else. So I had a roommate. We both had our own rooms. We had a living room, a kitchen, and a balcony. In both of our rooms, we had a balcony, plus we had a balcony in the living room space. Now, this was a fairly upscale place, and I paid 7,000 peso every single month that I was in that place, plus a couple peso, 200 to 300 peso for utilities that I also had to pay every month. So I'm not quite sure what 7,000 peso translates to right at this time, but it might be anywhere between 450 to 500 Canadian. I'm estimating something like that. For the place I stayed in, it was very upscale, very similar to the Iris Studios and that other place in terms of, the environment was nice, it was clean, well taken care of. Definitely very upscale, and we got a very good deal for my time staying there for sure. In most places like that in Playa del Carmen, you would probably pay easily double for the type of place. It just so happened that the tenant that was already living there had a great relationship with the person that was, renting the place. And then I just so happened to be, in the right place at the right time, and I got a great deal, and I decided to live there 3 months with the roommate. And I would say that was one of the better deals I had gotten. Obviously at the time I had a roommate, but for the most part, the place was still massive. It was big. The internet worked very well. We had a pool. This pool was not on the rooftop. It was on the ground floor. And for the price, I think it was about 500 Canadian. I'm not quite sure again what 7,000 peso translates to, but I think at least about 500 Canadian, give or take. And so that was a really great deal for the type of place that it was. Now that was 3 months. Now, I stayed another 3 months in a gated community that was in the jungle area. Now, this was right, if you take Constituentes, you go Constituentes all the way through, and it'll take you past the Super Aki and a Boston Pizza. You keep going, you'll run into a Go Mart. You keep going, you'll run into an OXXO store. You keep going, and it's a little bit past that in one of those areas there. I'm not going to say the name of it just for the sake of keeping it private, because obviously there's other people also that live there. Not that there's not other people that live at the other places that I mentioned, but anyways, in this specific case, I rented a room in someone's house, and I did that for 3 months. So what I had is I had my own room where I could sleep. I had a desk there, I could work. I had a balcony as well. The balcony was ground floor, and then also I had the kitchen. I could use the kitchen, and of course I could use the living spaces anytime I needed to. Now, we had multiple other people living there, and I did this for 3 months, but my rent there was just 300 Canadian every single month. So this was the most affordable that I've ever had in Playa del Carmen. It was fairly close to Plaza Las Americas, like maybe a 15-minute walk. So I would go there to use the gym there, the Smart Fit. And so it was a nice area. It was a nice 3 months. Also keep in mind the place that I rented there was a public space where there was hammocks, kind of like a park vibe under the trees, and also a pool that you could use as well. And so that was all included for the 300 Canadian that I spent every single month. Again, out of all the places I stayed, this was the most affordable one. And obviously I rented the space. I had to make it work with other people. But if you're going for something super affordable, then you're going to probably want to rent something with other people. And you could find spaces to rent with other people for 300 to 400 Canadian a month quite easily. If you're going to find places for yourself to rent for 400 to 500 Canadian a month, then there might be something like studio places in places that are not as upscale, maybe a little bit more rundown, give or take, okay? Now, that being said, I spent 1 additional month in Playa del Carmen that was by myself, and in this specific place, I spent 5,000 peso. Again, I think 5,000 peso was about 350, anywhere between 350 to 400 Canadian, and this was close to the when I first lived in Playa del Carmen, the Iris Studios, it was on the same street, but it was on the opposite side of the bridge. And about 2 streets onto the opposite side of the bridge, it was very close to the Evolve Gym. There's an Evolve Gym that is right on the corner of Juarez and where the street is, I believe, or where the bridge is, I believe. Anyway, without getting too far into that, it was on the same street as where Iris Studios is, just on the opposite side of the bridge, like 2 blocks in. And this was a studio-like place. It had air conditioning. It basically had a kitchen, a fridge, a washroom, and a bed where you could, of course, sleep. The Wi-Fi was not too great at that place, to be honest. I don't know the name of the place. It didn't really have a name, so I don't know what it would be called. And it didn't really have a rooftop, even though there was a rooftop you could go up to, but it was nothing, like, it was not necessarily legal to go up there. I would just go up there at night, and you have a bit of a view, but there was no protection up top on the rooftop. It wasn't, let's say, a rooftop that you could go up there, legally, so to speak. So in theory, this place doesn't have a rooftop, but I paid 5,000 peso plus utilities. I had to pay for the air conditioning and the internet as well. So I think by the time it was all said and done, I paid like 56 to 5,800 peso. So I would have probably been at 350 to 400 Canadian for this place for the 1 month. Now, this was a decent place. It was very similar to the Green Hills place, I would say, but maybe a little bit more upscale than the Green Hills place. Anyways, for the most part, I averaged probably paying between 500 to 600 Canadian per month for rent in Playa del Carmen. And I'll give you a better idea of what you can expect for being able to rent a place. The first thing is, it really depends on the location, okay? So if you want to go in a place that is closer to the ocean, you will likely pay a little bit more. You have to understand that. If you're gonna go in an area called Playa Car, you're also likely going to pay more. If you're going to go into that jungle area, into newer developed areas, you will likely pay more if you're trying to rent a place by yourself. But in those newer developed areas, there's many people renting out rooms in their own place, or they're renting out the whole place, which has 2 to 3 rooms sometimes. So you could find other people potentially to rent the whole entire place with, and you could ultimately end up renting something for 500 per person, or maybe even 600 Canadian per person per month for the most part. If you want to rent your own place, then what you can do is you can find studios that are not as upscale, that you would spend anywhere between 400 to 600 per month Canadian, And obviously you'd have to sacrifice, it's not as upscale, some of those. If you want studios by yourself or one bedrooms by yourself, you can definitely find something that is $1,000, anywhere between 800 to 1,200 Canadian. You can for sure find something that is quite nice. Again, one of the better options if you want something nicer and you don't quite have the budget to make it work, I would suggest try to find somebody that you can partner up with and you can rent a nicer place, like a 1 or 2 bedroom place. Obviously you want your own privacy. If you're going to be with 2 people, you probably want to get a 2 bedroom place. So you could find something nicer that you can share with someone and you can get a better deal because of that. But then of course you're sharing it with someone and you have to be okay with that. Overall, you could definitely rent something for 400 to 600 Canadian, whether that is by yourself. If it's by yourself, between 400 to 600 Canadian a month, by yourself will probably be not as upscale unless you find a really good deal. If you live in someone's house, you rent a room, 300 to 400 Canadian, you could definitely do that. And it could be nice, it could be not as nice, it really depends, okay? Obviously, anything above that, both for renting a room out of someone's place or for renting, a place with someone else, you can definitely find a lot of places, above that. I'm just sharing with you my experience and what I paid, so you have an understanding of what I was able to find, and you can definitely find things within the realm of what I was able to do. One other thing you can consider, and I always, for the most part, used Airbnb, but you can consider getting Facebook and, going into different rental Facebook groups. There's lots of people posting different places for rent there. And sometimes they want you to make longer commitments, but sometimes you can find better deals in the Facebook groups for short-term rentals than you could maybe on Airbnb. Because sometimes with Airbnb, what happens is they will take, a $50 or $60 or $100 Airbnb fee on top of your rent. Now, I'll give you something that you could do. With this, I'm not suggesting you do, because maybe you don't want to get blocked on Airbnb if that's your sole way of, what you're using to find rentals. But what you could do is, instead of renting a place on Airbnb for a month, you might rent it for a day or two. And what you'll tell the homeowner or the landlord, or you'll contact them and you say, hey, I would like to see the place. Can I see the place first before I book it long term? Most of the time they will say yes. And you go there, you look at the place, and you negotiate a deal with them there that is outside of Airbnb that will give you a bit of a better deal. Again, I'm not saying you should do that because you might get your Airbnb account blocked. I'm not saying that's what I did. You can connect one and one. I may have, I may not have, but that will give you a better deal rather than having to pay the Airbnb fee all the time if you're looking for the best deal possible. Okay, so I'm just putting that out there for you. And again, the Facebook groups are a great option because you can find maybe better deals in the Facebook groups, or you could even just walk around. If you're in Playa del Carmen and you have a place and you're just scouting for a new place, take a couple hours, go to a certain neighborhood, walk around the neighborhood. There's lots of signs up for rent. Take your phone with you and send those people a WhatsApp, and then many will respond, let you know if it's available, and you can negotiate deals with them based on that. I did that actually a couple times as well, and it works well. Okay. Now, with that being said, we've covered rent. So let's move on to transportation. Transportation in Playa del Carmen, it really depends on where you want to go and what you want to use it for. If you are a tourist, most of the time and you want to use a taxi, they will try to charge you tourist rates. So what I encourage you to do is, if you use a taxi, you ask them for the local rate. You tell them, I'm a local here, I'm living here, I want the local rate. And if they give you the local rate, it's not going to be that expensive to take taxis. But if they give you the tourist rate, you're going to pay a lot more. I'll be honest with you, I hardly ever use taxis. Maybe twice that I used a taxi my entire time staying the 17 months in Playa del Carmen. Both times it was not that expensive. I think I probably got in between the tourist and the local rate, give or take. I'm not quite sure. Anyways, the public transportation system, there's lots of buses and lots of vans called colectivos that you can take. They're super cheap. Most of the time in Playa del Carmen, I walked everywhere as much as I could. Occasionally, I would go to Tulum, so I would take a colectivo, pay like 45 or 50 peso, and go to Tulum. Occasionally, I would also go to Cancun. I would, same thing, take a colectivo, 45 to 50 peso, which is about $3 Canadian, give or take maybe $3.50 Canadian, $3.50 Canadian, that is. So you could take a colectivo for anywhere between $3 to $4 Canadian to go to Tulum. Same thing to go to Cancun. If you want to do that, obviously that is super affordable. If you want to, obviously within the city, take collectivos, super affordable as well. I really hardly ever did that. Only a couple times when I would go from place to place. If I had to move and I had my bag or something, I would like take a colectivo, from here to here type of thing. And you pay like 11 peso, like not even $1 to go from one place to the other. They also have big buses or bigger buses. I never really took any of those buses, but I imagine they're also very cheap. Transportation all in all within the city is very cheap. Again, if you get the local rates, and especially if you take collectivos or buses, they always give you local rates there. But if you take taxis, just make sure you ask for the local rate so that you don't end up paying tourist rates. If you go, obviously, the tourist area, Fifth Avenue, where there's a lot more tourists, you're gonna pay higher prices there, so keep that in mind. Okay, with that being said, let's cover food. If you go to local areas, local restaurants, local markets, whether you wanna buy groceries such as fruits, vegetables, and even meats, I suggest you go to local markets. Obviously, you have to be able to pay in cash there. You can probably get the best deals at these local markets. I usually mix it up with, if I have cash, I go to local markets as much as I could. Other than that, I would go to places like Chedraui and sometimes Soriana. Chedraui, I found, had overall the best prices grocery-wise, and their produce was pretty good. Sometimes maybe Soriana has a little bit more fresh vegetables and fruits, but overall, Chedraui, I find fruits, vegetables also quite fresh. And the average price, I think, for me anyway, I found Chedraui had a little bit better options. Chedraui also has options for the most part where you can eat there. So they have like a kitchen serving a bunch of different type of foods. That's also an option if you don't want to cook your foods. But I suggest if you don't want to cook, try to go to local restaurants, because the local restaurants, you'll get the best prices. If you go to, regular type restaurants in the tourist area on Fifth Avenue, you're really not going to pay that much less than what you would be used to paying in places like Canada, USA, or the UK. So for the most part, for me, I really never went to any places on Fifth Avenue unless I would go to kind of like cafes there where I would get a latte or a coffee. And to be honest, you would spend $3 to $5 for a latte or a coffee there anyway. So it's pretty much the same as Canada or US, at least in my experience, on Fifth Avenue. If you go to local cafes that are maybe not so touristy, you can spend anywhere between $2 to $3 for a latte or a coffee, even less at some other ones. But of course, it just depends where you go and what you're looking for. I suggest go as local as much as possible. You will definitely get much better deals. For food-wise, local restaurants will give you much more volume of food. Usually it's something like comida del dia. It's like the meal of the day or something. I don't even know what it means, but it means something like meal of the day. And usually that's anywhere between 60 to 75 peso, which is about 4 to 5 Canadian dollars for a meal. If you were to go to Fifth Avenue, you're going to pay a lot more for your meals there. So keep that in mind. Overall, I would say that with food, if you mix in cooking some at home and you mix going to local restaurants, you can definitely do it for 300 to 400 Canadian a month. I would say for sure. And the overall combining, let's say food, combining rent, and combining, we'll say transportation in Playa del Carmen, you could definitely do it for 1,000 Canadian a month. Again, this is if you rent your place for, we'll say 400 to 500 is your rent, and then we'll say with food, transportation, everything else combined also 400 to 500. That would take you to about 1,000 a month. When I lived in Playa del Carmen, outside of the times when I paid a little bit more for those apartment rentals, when I paid 700 to 900 for those more upscale apartments, my average was anywhere between 1,000 to 1,100. No more than 1,200 a month is what I used to pay when I was living there. But to be honest, I was never keeping it super tight. I always had a fairly open budget, in the sense that I allocated a certain amount to rent, and I would allocate a certain amount of food, try to not restrict myself too much if I wanted to go to local restaurants and enjoy the food and support the economy. Because I put it to you this way, I could definitely have lived for a lot less. It's very possible to live for 800 a month, Canadian, for sure. You squeeze your rent a little bit, you squeeze your food a little bit, you cook more at home, and you can definitely live for 800 Canadian a month. But if you want to be a little bit more open, 1,000 Canadian a month, you can easily do it. And again, this is especially if you're going to rent something with someone together, or you rent a room in someone's house, you can definitely do it for that. If your rent's a little bit higher, that might increase your overall monthly spend. But overall, I would say you could look at 800 to 1,200. Within that window, you can easily do that in Playa del Carmen. And again, that's going to be putting everything together. Now, that doesn't really include partying, because for myself, I don't really go out partying. I'm not that big of a fan for that. I will occasionally go out to a place and have 1 to maybe 2 drinks. And the reason I don't really like to go out partying for the most part is because I don't see the point of going to a restaurant or a bar and paying 3 to 4 times the amount for a drink. It just doesn't make any sense to me. I would rather put my money into other things than to do that, because the thing is, the night goes by and then the next day comes and it's like, why did I put my money there? So to me, a lot of that doesn't make sense. I would rather, if I'm going to go out partying and I really want to drink a lot, I would rather buy, what I want to drink and drink it at home or with friends before I go to the place, and then go to the place and have maybe 1 or 2 drinks. So I'm not spending a fortune at the place, because I don't see a point in spending a fortune at a place. They charge usually 3 to 4 times more for a drink, and I don't see a point in doing that. So that's just my own kind of view on that. You can do what you want to do, of course. Keep in mind, everything I shared with you, it's not considering if you're gonna go out partying, if you're gonna drink or do drugs, things of that nature, which again, I do not recommend that you do. It's just if you're gonna do that, you will likely spend more money, okay? So, with that being said, I hope you found this video valuable. If you did, please give it a thumbs up if you haven't already. And if you have any thoughts or questions, please type them in the comments for me below and I'll respond as soon as I see them. Also, make sure you are subscribed to the channel so you do not miss future videos that I produce for you, because I plan to share more videos with you based on my own life experience related to travel and more. And finally, I encourage you to go to the description of this video below right now. I have quite a few unique offers there for you. What I encourage you to do is check out every single unique offer that I have there for you and get access to all the unique offers that you need and or want. Note that any offers you get access to, I will be getting a percentage, so I do appreciate you for checking out the description, for clicking any of the links, and for accessing any of the offers that I have there for you, because through that way, you're also supporting me. Thank you so much for tuning into this video. I appreciate you so much. Stay blessed, and let's go.